So today, let's take a moment. We're going to talk about, I guess, love and other things. And by the way, welcome everybody around the world that's tuning in to us. It's kind of cool because what we share here is shared with the world. All the same things you hear in A Course in Miracles. You know, you can't have something and not share it and expect to keep it. So it's kind of nice that we're sharing it to another level. And it's quite amazing. There are people, you know, we're all in this room, and there's folks in this room from other countries. There's folks in this room from other states that come to visit, partly, and I hear a lot of you say, I came here to be in this room, to be part of these sacred services for the week that I'm here and so on. So, I mean, we're really, really honored with that. And to imagine that there's people in their homes in Argentina and Japan and the Philippines and here and there tuning in to, you know, be part of this. And I just think that's incredible. It's something that occurred to me, oh my gosh, it must be 15 or so years ago. I thought, kind of a dream of being able to do this, but the technologies just weren't there. So I just totally did my best to keep it out of my mind until the day would come when it couldn't be manifest. That's why I'm so grateful for the folks that pitch into this. So I'd like to talk about love, but not just love and not just partner love. Love at a deeper level, but in a grounded sort of a way. And along with love, I want to talk about some things that people tend to struggle with. And this brochure that was given to me was talking about, struggling with, the idea of God, and why does God allow things to go wrong in our relationships? Why does God allow war and so on? And it's amazing because humans sit around and actually think about these things. And there's no answer to that question, because as soon as you insist that God is the one doing this, you can't actually get an answer other than your own. And sometimes they're beautiful. They're just wrong. But they're beautiful. You know what? I think God is doing this, just ripping us apart because he's trying to teach us. And that's like putting isn't that nice? And God's like, no habla inglés. I've got nothing to do with any of this. Ask for my presence. Ask to get out of the way and feel and be and think and speak my presence. And everything would be fine. Edge me out. Start trying to manufacture your own day-to-day lives. And here's what you're going to get. It isn't a punishment from God. It's our own lack of divinity that creates a lack of a divine life. A lack of our awareness of who we are. So we have, what that's called is a lack of responsibility. So, I sit in board meetings, I do consultations with people, I hear feedback from people, read books, and brochures. And it's amazing that humans are trying to figure this out, but they're still putting into the context of God is doing it to us. And you can't have a loving, true, accurate answer come with that already predetermined statement. Why does God do this means any answer you get is going to have to be because what? Because God loves, because God's trying to teach us, but it's still going to be God's fault. Somebody's got to ask a different question. Maybe it isn't God. Well, then who is it? I think it's those people. It's still outside of ourselves, and as long as you're still talking about others, which is outers, then there's no you. Outers, others, like utters. It makes you an utter failure to blame everything on other people. That was Swami channeling through me. So the farce is with me. Okay. So we have to think. I talked last week about multidimensional consciousness. Multidimensional consciousness. And we have to start to recognize relationships are the last place you should be thinking so linearly. Blaming. If I'm not happy, it's your fault, linearly. If I'm happy, it's because you're so wonderful to me, until they're not. Now I'm unhappy again, and it's your fault. So 1 minute I'm crediting you for my happy days, and then I'm blaming you for my unhappy days, but it's still some other person. And it's so strange because this world teaches nothing but that everything's outside of us. And we cannot find God, nor self, nor any of the qualities of those, love, peace, joy, abundance, while in that state of mind of outer projecting, or transference for that matter. So we have to think more multidimensionally. Some people will say relationships are defined as men are different from women. And we start stereotyping Mars and Venus and Pluto and Saturn and whatever else. And that's not actually going to help anybody. I'm sometimes struck by people who say, well, here's a great way that we can do communication from now on. Let's learn to just agree to disagree. Why don't we learn to agree to agree? What about that option? How come people keep leaving out other options, better options? Just like the, why does God do this? And we're now stuck with a negative answer. So what about this? There is no real men and women being different, even if it's within same gender relations. The masculine one's going to be different from the feminine. It doesn't make sense to me. But I'm weird, so you might not agree with me after all I'm done here today. Because I'm a little odd. Well, I'm very odd. But the way I think about things, I go, well, wait. That doesn't make sense. That we're supposed to just viva la difference. Where's the connection part? I think men and women, people, get along better by finding their connections than by accepting their differences. Maybe that's a step. Humans, sometimes they need to start with baby steps, so fine. But try eventually to think into the big steps, like the connection, how we agree. And that's what's called bridging. So instead of saying, well, I see your point, that's valid for you, mine's different, let's just agree to disagree, shake hands, which means I don't really like you. But I'm going to practice nonviolent communication. Even though I want to strangle you. I'm not going to do it because I'm nonviolent. That's not real. That's not real. I'm sorry, man. But that's not real. How can you, instead of walking away with a little angst, a difference, because under that difference is angst. They're still not seeing your way, and you can pretend you're okay with that, but you're not. Because your ego's involved, and your ego's never happy. So what's really happening then? I could also just say, well, wait. I don't think I agree with that point, but I think I'm starting to understand how you came to that. Any amount of bridging their direction is good. It's healthy. And how beautiful to open our minds to understand where people are coming from without trying to change them or force them into a different thought. I mean, here's something as simple as this. We played a song earlier today. It really was a little bit before my total awareness of music. I was there but that tune didn't really work. I mean, I wasn't into that tune, wasn't into that band, and so forth. There was a difference between me and them. And I had to get over that. I had to, why is that song in my mind? I don't know. And I put it out of my mind because it's not my kind of music, not my kind of band. But when I set it aside, and I thought, but why is it coming to me? And I sat down and I Googled the lyrics. I went, oh my God, it's so cool to be wrong. It's so nice to be wrong because I had an opinion. You know, there was no harsh hurt behind it or any harsh judgment behind it. It was a mild one. And that was that, not into that sort of thing. That wasn't my particular style for its various reasons and even the culture of the time. Just wasn't my thing. And then I listened to it and I'm going, and I couldn't get it out of my head. Days I'm walking around singing that tune. And then I said, man, this is going to be amazing to share it here. Because just as simple as a little song that seems different, there's a healing by my expanding my mind enough to see what that was about. And there was depth and beauty there that I didn't see when I was in a different state of mind. We all have to practice expanding the mind to be able to see these other pieces. Not just going, well, we'll just differ. We'll just agree to differ. That music's not my thing. I'm over here. It's over there. Let me try it. Let me try and understand what they're saying in this tune. And ended up downloading a few songs from that band because that's what healing looks like. It's just a metaphor, but that's what healing looks like. All of a sudden, I'm more accepting of other pieces to things, and now I feel at peace around it. I didn't even know I wasn't at peace around it. But when we open ourselves up to expand our consciousness, Spirit will find all those little bits that are not yet healed. It doesn't mean we're bad that stuff still shows up. We're human. But it's nice. What are you going to do about it once these pieces show up? Why did you come across that picture out of the blue? You thought you had ceremoniously burned every picture of that person from your past. Whew, now we're done with them. 18 years later, you're going through a book like your Bible. or something, that to make it even more funny, that your picture of your ex is in your Bible or something, and it falls out and it's like, oh, and it can grip you. That's an opportunity. Look at it as, hey, here's some extra bits you hadn't finished with. Did you not notice it when your stomach gripped? So this is what life's going to do. It's going to bring around these residual bits. So our relationship, we're learning to, here's what it comes to in a nutshell. There's 3 relationships we have: God, self, and others. But the relationship with self is the bridge between God and others. The bridge, we're the bridge. The relationship with ourselves is the bridge between the one with God and others. So if I disconnect from God and try to change the world, I can't be as effective. I have to have all 3 relationships flowing in that order. God inspires me. I integrate those inspirations and become them, and then I make a difference in the world. Then there's those of us who don't have the middle relationship with us. We get inspirations, and then we try to preach them to the world. See, that's different again. God, others, no work on self, that doesn't work. Then some of us are very monk-like, God and self. We just stay away from others. Once again, that's not actually complete. God, self, and others. I mean, some of us are like, well, the God and self is great. It's others I have problems with. And I've shared this many times, but the old Bob Newhart show. I've shared this a few times, and I think it's hilarious. But Mr. Carlin, he was the guy that talked like this. Hi, Bob. So, in a short version of the story, he comes in, hey, Bob, and Bob Newhart's, hey, Mr. Carlin, how's it going? Well, I did the homework you gave me, and he had a stack of papers this big. What's that you got? He said, well, you asked me to make a list of all the people I hate. And the paper stack is this big. Listen to this. And Bob Newhart comes back with a zinger. Well, why didn't you just bring the whole New York phone book? Ha, ha, ha. Mr. Carlin goes, because some are from out of town. Isn't that great? Like, oh, what a wonderful little twist, So we can't just, well, God and I are doing great. That's what a lot of that aesthetic can tempt us to do. Stay in our homes and away from the world. And it's tempting, man. It's tempting when we see stuff on this planet. We don't usually go, apparently I have some work to do and help humanity today because they're acting insane. What we do is go, man, people are so nuts, I'm out of here. I'm just going to sit back and be holy. But how can you be holy without some? It doesn't make any sense. So, in a nutshell, there needs to be this idea of a better relationship with ourselves. And we can't actually even be good partners to others without a healthy self. So I need to have a good relationship with God and with self and bring that to others. But the healthy relationship with self and bringing it to others means affection and connection and communication. But the relationship with self has to rely heavily on this: responsibility. And in a nutshell, how do we become more responsible people? You have to have practice like self-inventory, self-observation, self-awareness. How do you have a relationship with self if you don't know yourself? So it takes time to kind of get to know each other. How? Meditation, asking yourself questions like, man, I'm feeling agitated. What's that about? What am I really feeling? Or asking yourself questions like, when I feel rejected, what does that bring up and why? Just even doing an inventory like that, 12-step work. We have to have a relationship with self. And I've heard, the new agey people say, well, Michael talks about you have to kind of get clearer before you can really speak without judgment. So what they'll do is they'll get ticked off, go, hold it, okay, I'm clear, and then tell me, or whomever, their judgments. They think that just pausing and taking a breath makes it all okay to go back to judgmental thinking. You can't actually do it. So here's the trick. There's a statement in the Bible, the Lord watches my coming in and my going out. And a meaning to that I had realization on many years ago, and I just think it's amazing. The Lord watches my coming in and my going out. What it means in part is, when I have anything happen in my life, I am asking God to guide me inside. Instead of outside, telling everybody what I think of them, the Lord's going to guide me to go inside. Why? So that I can look at what it brings up in me, I can learn about myself. I can learn to see what my responsibility is in what's happening. Very nice. And then after I go inside me, I go a step further and commune with God. Very good, but that's only the coming in. What about the going out? After I commune with God, then I come out. So you've done something to me. You said something that hurt my feelings or made me upset. I need to go inside. Instead of just telling you you're bad, wrong, I need to go inside. And I check in and see what's going on. Wow, what's this really about? The linear mind would say, I don't have to go inside. They're just bad. They're mean. They're wrong. Course in Miracles, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? So I think I'm going to go inside because my happiness won't come from making them wrong or beating them down or defeating them in a debate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside. And then I go inside and I go, oh my God, what's this? How weird. And it could be anything. It could be the smallest issue. It could be a mosquito buzzing around your head. And it annoys you. And you go, well, Michael said this works on anything, so what the heck? Fine. I'm aware that this mosquito is annoying me. Let me just look inside. As Michael suggested, as silly as this is, I'm just going to look inside. Fine, mosquitoes, they kind of bug me. Who else has ever bugged me in my life? Why do things bug me? Because they won't go away. Ooh, what's coming up? Everybody. Everybody. Have you ever had a relationship? Everybody that ever lived with me. Oh, I wish you were not here, mosquito. And all this other stuff's coming out. And the mosquito's just... All I know is I heard someone say, I would like somebody to bug me. So I thought you'd be a great person to zoom in and see if it was you. And so what's happening is the outside world is having these things happen to reflect to us unresolved pieces in ourselves. The mosquito's fulfilling that purpose, and people do this too. I'd be so happy if this person weren't in my life, if they weren't playing a role in my movie. But what we have to learn to ask ourselves is, why did we decide to play a horror movie today? We can say, why is this person in my movie? But ask yourself why you, the person who wrote the script, hired the actors, filmed the film, pushed play on watching it, and it ended up being a horror movie. Well, when you hire people for horror movies, you want those kinds of actors. So it's kind of amazing that the people that we least like are often not liked for doing such a great job at playing a certain role. But what we don't want to do is admit that we played a part in the particular theme of the movie. If I have loneliness, then I'm going to be one of those directors that films a lot of those kinds of movies. The musicians that play the background music are going to be like this. Loneliness and sadness. It won't be kind of music. It's going to be something else. And if you want a horror movie kind of a thing, then you need another screechy, weird kind of sound. Believe it or not, everything we're experiencing is perfect. And some people use that phrase and they have no idea what it means. Well, it's all perfect. And they think it means it's all happening perfect divine order as God wants it. No, as you want it. God, again, has nothing to do with it. God's saying, well, I wouldn't recommend any horror movies, especially when you mix horror movies with romance. I just don't think I would do it, but do what you want. I would just say, and if you do it, here's what I recommend. Use it to learn and heal. Because then you still find God, even through the horror movies mixed with romance. Because that's weird. If you walk down an aisle and you hear music, weird, romance with horror, music, sound effects. But nobody wants to pay attention. So we have to listen. What is the music being played? Meaning, what kinds of signs and symbols are coming up in my life? If I find my stomach turning every time I'm going to work, something's off. If I find myself tense when I think about sharing intimacy with a partner, something's not right. Listen to the sound in the music that doesn't match the movie you're hoping you're watching. Listen to it. Listen to the sound. Listen to the feelings. Listen to the body, and so on. Not to say overanalyze them, but open our minds to experience a bit more of what's really happening. So responsibility is a huge part of what we're missing. And the problem is a lot of people think responsibility means blame, and it doesn't. There's a quote from A Course in Miracles I just printed out, and it's as follows. First of all, a Taoist saying, which I've shared before, but to know others is wise, but to know yourself is enlightenment. And that just says it all right there. Now, A Course in Miracles is going to say to you, our power of decision is the determiner of every situation in which we seem to find ourselves by chance or accident. No accident or chance is possible within the universe of God as God created it, outside of which there is nothing. So there is no possibility of things just happening by chance. It's all first in our belief systems and then experienced as a manifestation. Why? To show us our belief systems. Why would the universe, which is actually the Divine Mother, show us, why would she materialize as something that doesn't even seem great? It's not very wonderful. Why is she doing that? Because she's showing us where we are on and where we are off. So she materialized. She doesn't have any judgment about it. She doesn't have any investment in it. It's just she taps into your heart and soul and says, what are you about? And if your heart and soul says, I still have some abandonment issues, she says, and so it is. And then she'll materialize as another story of abandonment. Not trying to harm us, but simply saying, what do you think? Here, look at me. I'm abandonment. What do you think? So that we can go, I don't really like that. I think enough is enough. No more abandonment, no more low self-worth or whatever the pattern is. I think I'd like to change something. Then she says, and so it is. We change our consciousness and she materializes in a new form. The drag is she can't just fix us. She can't materialize in a form that we haven't yet believed in consciousness. So this isn't just a little lecture, mini lecture on positive thinking. Because even your thinking comes from your beliefs. I'm saying, again, for the millionth time in my teachings over the years, everything stems from our beliefs about who we believe we are. Then the thinking comes, then the emotions come, and then the manifestation comes. But it all starts in our beliefs. And then, not only of who we believe we are, but who we believe everyone else is. Because I can say, I think I'm actually quite wonderful, but other people are a problem. You're actually seeing in them things you don't like that are hidden in you still. So if there's only a relationship with one, how am I doing? So I have to look at my relationship with all. And let's say that you go, I'm down to loving all nearly 7 billion people on the planet, except one, they're kind of annoying. That one is still caring for you, the last bit that is your salvation. If I can figure out what that last thing is and resolve it, I'm back into my divine mind. So why wouldn't I want to do that, you see? And people are afraid. Because this world teaches us that the path, the journey in life is supposed to be outer and not inner. And when we learn that that path needs to be turned and we go this direction, the ego self and the world supports that if you try to look within, you're going to find things you don't like. I mean, if you look within, you might find memories of being molested. You might find people that didn't love you. You might even go to past lives where people murdered you, and they're now in your life. You know, carpooling used to be okay. Now, all of a sudden, I had some inner journey, and I saw who everybody was and the roles we played, and the guy sitting next to me killed me in ancient Rome, fed me to the lions, and he wants to stop at Burger King. I'm getting weird feelings. I don't know that I can. Mind if we go to a vegan restaurant instead, So think about that. That's what would happen. Can you handle that? Because if you want to be enlightened, that means the light comes on all things. And all of a sudden you're aware. And you can handle it, can you? Can you handle knowing that the person who you're now in love with was once a slave owner and you were one of their slaves? Can you go through that and release it and find love again with them? Not the love that's compelled from a past life, but a fresh, new, I forgive you love. Most people don't think they can do that. Most people don't even want to try. But in our belief that we can't pull that off, we find ourselves bound. We have to deepen our understanding of things. And don't just sit around liking some and not liking others and talk about quantum physics and multidimensional consciousness, because then you're a hypocrite. How can you go to multi-dimensions of consciousness when you haven't even healed the third dimension, the people around you? It makes no sense, and it's hypocrisy. So for me to expand into higher dimensional consciousness should never be through synthetic means. And I don't just mean synthetic chemicals, even organic chemicals that set you into higher dimensions. That's not the best route. And again, some people don't dig me saying that. Well, too bad. Stop getting so wasted to find God, because it ain't going to happen. Find God through love. Love is organic. The more loving we are, the more we expand into multidimensionality. Force it through anything. Force it, and it's synthetic to some degree or another. You want to know God, you want to expand into higher dimensionality, multiple dimensions of consciousness, you raise your consciousness. I mean, isn't that simple math? I want to go to higher dimensions. Well, then get higher consciousness. Not get high, get higher consciousness. People are like, oh, but that takes time. Watch this. Woo! I see all kinds of cool things. You're actually destroying brain cells, and you're seeing the reflection of that. Everything looks really cool. Yeah, because you're watching things die multidimensionally. It's true. God brings life. Synthetic things bring death, a form of death. It destroys life. There's biogenic, biostatic, and biocytic. Some things just sustain, but some things bring life, and some things destroy life. So many people who try to find higher consciousness, but through synthetic means, it's only detrimental. I'm not judging you for it, it's fine. But I'm saying there's a different way. But that different way is just like people, fast foods versus growing an organic garden. Guess which one takes more time and effort? But it does bring better health to your cells. And the fast foods that are more convenient tend to be biocytic. Of course, consciousness is more important. I'm not preaching diet. I'm preaching that consciousness is what it's all about, our beliefs. So we have to expand our understanding of things. First and foremost, the relationship with self is right there at the threshold between God and others. I would like to help others means I have to first get myself a little bit, not perfect, but a bit in order. Be a better person and bring that to others. As an example, not a preacher, as an example. That's where it goes first. Then go ahead and preach it, teach it, but do not preach, teach that which you are not, because then you're a hypocrite. So whether it's diet is your thing or spirituality is your thing, just be careful that you're aligned and congruent. To say to your children, I don't like that boy you're dating, but you're married to some freakazoid, it doesn't make any sense. You're showing them that you have no integrity, no boundaries, but you're telling them, I don't like that person you're dating. Well, why, Mom? Well, because he seems this and he seems... They could just say, that's just like Dad, isn't it? People don't want to take responsibility and recognize you cannot reach enlightenment without it being integrated in your day-to-day consciousness. And that means also your actions. And I know this stuff's not easy to hear, and it's not, I know it's a struggle. Because that means I'm going to have to look at this. That might mean I'm going to try to go to counseling with my partner. And if they say they don't want to go, now what am I going to do? It's better to not bring it up. And that people think is spiritual. I'll just be quiet. And that looks so nice. Look at me. I'm passive. And that's spiritual, isn't it? No, actually it isn't. Because if you die today with things you could have done better, like setting better boundaries and healthier boundaries in your life, you're only coming back to try it again. Which means I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed with your spiritual personal practice if what you're doing tells me you're going to have to come back again. There's something you could have done differently. What if you're only here to learn boundaries against unhealthy behavior? Why don't you just do it? That'd be so cool. That's all I'm here for. Yeah, let me leap in there and do it. That'd be like somebody saying, look, you have a disease. This herbal tea could help you. Try this herbal tea out. 30 days later, you're healed. Why wouldn't you want to do that tea? Why wouldn't you want to do something that actually helps you and heals you? Well, it's the same thing with this. We have to take responsibility, look inside. So there's another quote I want to share. The Course is basically saying, if you can get the meaning of this paragraph, it'll change this part of your life. This part of healing your relationship with yourself. I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience, and I decide on the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I asked for and receive exactly as I have asked. Not literally asked, but the frequency I put out there. I got this pattern that I'm unlovable, and there it goes. And the world will just keep reflecting that. And until the day I say, I have a feeling I played a part in this, I have a feeling that I'm playing a role in this, until I do that, I can never turn my life around. I could look like I'm going to counseling. I can look like I'm reading books on the subject and make people think I'm doing better. But if out of my mouth it's still everybody else's fault, I actually haven't gotten anywhere. And I'm not saying you're supposed to shift and go, it's my fault. It isn't the word fault. It's, I can see that people have been unhealthy and hurtful. But the Lord watches my going in and my coming out, so watch. I can see people have been hurtful, but let me look at what that brings up inside. I go inside and I process a bit. I go in further and I connect with God and say, okay, it's good to be in this respite, this oasis, this quiet place after having this yucky stuff come up and after having been abused out here, yucky stuff in here. Now I get to be with God, love. And I meditate. Some people end it right there and they continue their life with more abuse, maybe some introspection and meditation. But they're missing something. They never took the meditation back to the next, which is me, God, self, others. Remember? God, self, others. So when somebody offends me, I don't just look at others, I look at self to see what it brings up. Then what? Then I go in and connect with God, commune with God. Then what? The next relationship going this way is what? Self. So now, God inside, I connect, I bring it, tether that God presence into something called boundaries. Boundaries that are established within myself. So I take the connection with God instead of going, well, that's nice, I'm meditating with God, now I'll go back to my life where everybody's mean to me. You've missed something. It's not people are mean, but I see that I have some lessons to learn. I commune with God and go back to the mean people. What happens is I go inside, connect with God, bring God into self and say, okay, God, I'm getting ready to go back in. See? I'm in the corner of the ring, and there's rubbing the shoulders. Get ready. You're going in. Okay. All right. Send me in. When I go in, I get into self, and I say, what do you want me to do? And God says, how can we do it different this time? And here's where boundaries are taught to us. God wouldn't say, good job. That was a terrible thing they did. Now go do it again. God would say, thanks for communing with me. Thanks for looking at your part. Now here's a suggestion. Move out, or get a divorce, or try communicating better, or see a counselor. That's called a boundary. So we don't just theorize God out here. We bring God into us and say, so now that I'm going to go back out and deal with those others in my life, what's the best way to do it? How can I do it and bring the most God to that situation? Sometimes God will say, well, now that you feel more centered, you won't be as reactive, and they'll change. Sometimes God will say, it's probably best that you move out, away from them, because you are learning a lot, my beloved child. You're doing a great job, and you're becoming very loving and compassionate, which actually irritates them. So it's actually the better good for you to not push more buttons, but to step away. That might be the better good for you and that person. This is called healthy boundaries. And then you step into the relationship with others and you bring those boundaries. So it's like you're walking in to a situation informed. You now know exactly, you know what pushes your buttons. And it wasn't just them. You see that you have some challenges, some weaknesses, some unhealed wounds. You center and you say, I see my part. I can see that. Now I'm stepping into a conversation with you, and I notice that if I raise my voice, it scares you or you react, and then I contribute to an argument. What I'm going to do is step in here and say things differently, word myself differently, speak in a way that bridges our conversation. I'm going to bridge and create boundaries. And those boundaries can be, like I said, any different answer, but it comes from inside. If you upset me and I say, don't ever talk to me again, that's a reaction. If you upset me and I go inside and look at why I get so quickly triggered, then commune with God, then come with God back to self, and I see now that I looked at my part, I'm being given the right and clarity on setting a healthy boundary. Then I say to you, listen, I really, really do enjoy that we have conversations. I've enjoyed being a friend of yours for 15 years. Thank you. And sometimes I really struggle with knowing the best way to communicate, because sometimes we end up seemingly, disconnecting and fighting. Do you have any suggestions on what we can do? Say, that's bridging. And I didn't say you as much as I'm talking about me. I'm concerned. We seem to struggle, and that's a boundary. That's sharing, communicating my sense of self. Boundaries actually help enhance our ability to know ourselves and have a better life and relationship with ourselves. Boundaries are not determined by other people. They're determined by you going inside and saying, what is the greatest good? Then I come forward back into the world and I share my perspective. As far as I know, and I'm not perfect, as far as I know, if we have arguments and they start escalating, I'm going to probably need to say, I'm really sorry, I need to take a break and walk away. You see, that's a boundary. And I'm not doing it to harm anybody. I'm doing it because for me, that brings the greatest good. As far as I know, that's how it helps. If you say, no, you're not taking a break, we're going to finish this right now, I'm angry, but I need to take a break. No, I do not permit that. Oh, you sure? You know what I mean by are you sure? Do you get where I'm going with that? Yeah. Are you sure is kind of like one last, and if we cannot find healthiness, how could I not choose healthiness? And I cannot tell you guys, man, how often this whole thing of boundaries, I've been here for several years, and I've been teaching for several years, and I've been teaching and counseling the spiritual leaders in the world. And it's amazing to me that they're still not practicing healthy boundaries. I mean, we're spiritual leaders and we don't even know that the ABCs of standing for healthiness. Boundaries are not good people putting restraints on bad people. They're healthy people insisting on healthiness. I'm not even going to put my other hand up to relate other people to say, I'm healthy and you're not. No, it's not good against bad people. It's healthiness for healthiness. That's all. Call it this person, call it that person. I don't care. Healthiness is all I'm standing for. And when you say that to people, I don't know, but this is the healthiest thing I can imagine. Some people are so broken that they just can't imagine it. And what happens is boundaries, the lack of boundaries creates every form of addiction, including codependence. Why? Because the lack of boundaries means a lack of relationship with self. And the lack of relationship with self and self-awareness creates addictions. Of course I'm going to be an addict if I don't know what's behind it. Once I start looking at the roots to addiction, the addiction starts falling away. Why? Because it's not being fed. That fruit's dying on the vine because it's been uprooted. So boundaries, a strange thing to talk about to some people, in some people's mind, at a spiritual center. That's more of a psychology lecture or something, and it isn't. Boundaries are our spiritual muscles. You want to have somewhat toned muscles on earth to be able to stand and walk and move about and do things that you need to do. Just reasonably toned muscles on earth physically. You also need spiritual muscles, but they're called boundaries. And you have to exercise them. No, that doesn't work for me. That's a boundary. That doesn't feel right. That's a boundary. Learning to think for the greater good. Still, boundaries still incorporate the greater good. It's not selfishness. It's not me, I, me, mine. But you start to think differently. And as I'm coming towards a close, it does amaze me and astound me because I'll be talking to people of the highest caliber of spiritual enlightenment to the most simple. And it still comes back to the same thing. I have people say, no, I can't possibly say no to this, or I can't possibly set the line there because people will get upset. And I just think, wow. And one of the ways that I most seem to get across to people is when I say, you're telling me that the relationship you're in that's really dangerous and unhealthy, you can't see drawing a line. No, I can't. Would you recommend the relationship you're having? Would you recommend it to your daughter? Every time I've asked that, they say no. If they're having a negative or bad relationship, unhealthy relationship, they never go, well, yeah. My terrible relationship? Yes, I go to my children all the time. I hope you find one of these. They don't. Common sense in a human being, they don't even have to be spiritual students. Common sense in a human being with even half an intelligence is going to say, no. Why would I wish anything like this on that person? Then you're telling me, by default, that means you're telling me that you wouldn't recommend it to them, but it's okay for you. Why? And you know what it means is they don't love themselves enough to do something different. You can say, well, it's money. If I leave, I have no income. I understand that. Terrifying. But I'd rather be scared and healthy than seemingly falsely secure and unhealthy. It's dangerous as heck to try that. It's like saying if I start going into recovery, I'm going to go without my medications and drugs and whatever it happens to be and drinking. And does that sound fun? The chemical stuff that's going to happen in your system when you're determined to be healthy? No, you're going to go through withdrawals. And it doesn't sound like, let's do some withdrawals this afternoon. That doesn't sound exciting. What are you doing this afternoon? Nothing. You want to come over for some withdrawals? Like, people don't think of this as fun. Withdrawals are going to mean if I say no to my children who are abusing me, I might not see them for a while. You know what's worse is then the neighbors call. How could you do that? That's your child. You need to say, get behind me, Satan. Click. Not those words. But what you say is, you know what? I hear you, and I'm not in a place for that right now. Which means I don't want anybody to start tempting me to doubt myself when I start setting healthy boundaries. I can't afford it. So as I'm, like I said, coming to a close, when you want to know boundaries, just remember, what's the greatest good? Try that one. Try what feels healthy, what feels like it nurtures the presence of God in me. That's probably a right decision. Set boundaries when you see a lack of progress. Even if you have a client and they're not willing to go any further, you might have to say, you know what? Don't say, apparently you just don't get it. That's not what you would say. What you would say is, I'm not seeing that I can help you anymore at this time. And you might be thinking, but I can help them, but they're so stubborn. I know. Shh, don't say that. You might think it's true, but don't say that, because that's not the greatest good for that comment. Instead, what do you want to do? I'm not able to help you because it's true. It may be because they're stubborn like you think, but the truth is you can't help them, so say that. That's a boundary. When you see there's a lack of progress, when you see that it's the greatest good to do something different, you set boundaries. No-win situations are a good time to be placing some boundaries. Why not? I mean, if you're in a no-win situation, you have nothing to lose. So throw in some boundaries and shake things up a little bit. Every time I talk to my mom, we can only talk for 10 minutes, and then we end up arguing. Talk for 9. That's a boundary, but try something different. Oh, no. She times them. And if we talk less than 30 minutes, she feels offended and doesn't send me Christmas gifts. Then do this. At 9 minutes say, oh, the house is burning down. I'm going to have to go. And I know you're not sending me Christmas gifts this year, and I'm good with that. Bye. Click. Do something. Try some form of setting a boundary, knowing the withdrawals may come in the form of people complaining. And that leads me to that last piece. You have to ask yourself, because boundaries are rooted in self. Responsibility is rooted in self. So today, partly we're talking about a relationship with self. So one of the last pieces is you do have to ask yourself what you can afford. If you hear Michael Mirdad talk about, drawing a line in the sand and setting a boundary, and yet you do not believe you can afford it, then maybe you should rethink it and just let yourself continue as is, codependent, for a little longer. But definitely you do have to ask yourself what you can afford. Meaning, if you're having trouble at home in a partnership, but to break up now would be devastating financially. You'd literally be homeless. Maybe you can't afford to do that emotionally right now, but I would still move in that direction. I would go and start figuring out how to pinch a little money aside so that when I do go, I will have a couple months' rent. Is that making sense? I would make some calls and find out if ever I have to leave in an urgent situation, is there anybody I can rely on and go to? That's follow what you can afford to do is still setting a boundary. Because I could say, you should do this, and you might say, I can, but it's going to take me a few months to do that. That's a boundary you're giving. Don't follow my statement of what to do. You check in and say, that's a good idea, but how can I make that work for the greater good in my own life? Still has to go back to you determining. And when you do that, you know what you're doing? You're building your spiritual muscles. If all you do is do what Jesus told you, or anybody else, it's great. You're doing good, but it never gets integrated into your own ability to discern what is your own sense of healthiness. So Jesus or Buddha or Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa or Peace Pilgrim, they can say, here's what healthy looks like. And you can say, okay, I'll do exactly that. But when you recognize and go, that makes sense, let me try that, and you navigate it and you work it and you bring it in and you're discerning and you go, I love that and here's how that worked for me. That's integrated. Integrated where? To the relationship with self again. So, last quote I'm going to share. It's actually, I'm just going to summarize this quote. And because this is where we hear in the Bible things like, go with a brother twice as far as he asks. If a man asks for your coat, give him your shirt as well. We hear statements like that, even from Jesus, which sounds like total enabling. Anytime people ask for something, do it and even more. So that as though it means if somebody wants to behave hurtfully, just go, I'll bring it on. It sounds like that. So in the Course he says, I've said all these things, but if a person asks for something, do it, even if it's a foolish thing. He says in the Course, in fact, we should look at why we refuse such a request, but be certain that this does not mean to do a foolish thing that would hurt either of you. So he takes the do what people ask of you, and then he adds in the Course, but that never meant to the point of harming. He said, I just meant it as a metaphor to show people. When people say to you, you're busy right now, but I'm in a desperate situation. Can you give me a minute? Even though you're busy, try to give them that minute. That's what he's saying. Try to help and be of service. However, if that same person does that every day and it makes you late to work and you lose your job, he's saying, no, that's not what I meant. Help, be of service, always be forgiving. But if even your forgiveness looks enabling, it could tempt that person to hurt themselves or you. So, as I shared before, you can come to me and you've done something really horrible to me or some other people. And you can say, but, look, do you forgive me or whatever? I could say, absolutely. But if I go, oh, honey, absolutely, my beloved. If I act too passive, they might think that that's an open sesame to do it again. Do you understand that? But when you look firm, that's fine. That's fine. Consider it forgotten and let go. Just consider it fine and I won't bring it up again. But do not do that again. Do you notice on the outside, even though I'm not feeling do not do that again, they need to see that sometimes. Sometimes your kids need to hear, knock it off. Even though inside, oh, love, love, love. Inside, on the outside, you can't show them that. They're going to go, oh, that new age mom. She'd let me get away with anything. It needs to be sometimes humans, dogs, animals, people, children, parents, employees. They need to see that firm self. Please, please take this to the world. Please remember the value of responsibility and then responsible boundaries. Because the spiritual community, it may be one thing that's lacking most in the spiritual community. Responsibility and healthy boundaries. We thought that becoming spiritual meant enabling, being hyper passive. And it doesn't mean that at all. No. Learning to say no. But from inside my heart, I mean it from love. But if they need to hear it firmly, then let it be. Okay, is that making sense? All right. We're going to share just a brief meditation today. So let's relax our minds, relax our bodies, set aside all the stuff of the world. Good. Peace. How do we know the peace and love of God? How do we find that? It's not by being trampled on. And if we go inside and just bliss into meditation but not apply it, we might put greater storms around us in our lives. Why can't we just have good days? Why can't we have peace more often? It cannot happen if we're not living these principles. So, think of any challenging thing that's happened to you recently. Anything. A lack of income at work, car issue, a child being kind of argumentative with you, whatever it is, any challenge, small or large, be aware of it and just recognize it. No minimizing, no denying, just sit with it and recognize it. Be aware of all the stuff it could bring up. Yucky stuff, tensions, confusions, whatever they are. Think of those various kinds of feelings it brings up. Briefly look at any other time in your life when you ever felt similar emotions. Whether it's abandonment or betrayal or sadness or loneliness, confusion. Come to understand and own, I have felt this way before. This isn't the first time I felt this way. Even if the thing itself might be the first time you experience something, inner feelings, you felt this way before. Which means it's a pattern. Which could mean then, whatever's happening today or recently is actually a mirror or a reflection of these old patterns, these emotional hurts that you haven't yet healed. So I see that this thing has occurred before emotionally. So today's event, car, person is related to yesterday's events. That's how I step into myself, because the Lord watches my coming in and it's guiding me to see these deeper pieces. What does it bring up for me? Low self-worth, unworthiness, I'm not valued. Look at what it brings up and be honest. You're a third the way into the completing of the journey. Now that I see that it brings up stuff in me, I'm choosing to surrender all this and step into God. And just a choice and a breath, we go in and we find ourselves basking in the presence of God. Basking in the presence of God. Because I was feeling lonely, sad, or whatever, but now what do I really want to feel? God, I want to feel peace and joy. Think of two words that are the opposite of what that yucky stuff brought up. Love and self-worth, peace and joy. It's quite beautiful. And go there and breathe into it for a few breaths. The presence of God. Restored love and peace, happiness. Don't analyze it, just breathe it in like you're in the presence of heaven, because you are. Now before I go back into the world, because the Lord watches my coming out, before I go, how would this feeling in heaven, this peace, this joy, how can I manifest that inside of myself in a practical way in relation to boundaries? Ask that part. This peace that I am, what form would it take as I'm moving back towards the earth into the place of application? What do I do inside to make sure I don't lose this feeling? Because that's the trick. A boundary is putting a limit on how far away from God we will go. A boundary is putting a limit on how far you let other people go out of their God self. It's for their good. I don't want them to stray too far out of their God self, so I have to say no. Or to yourself. So what boundaries might you be able to implement? Not actions yet, but boundaries. I'm going to stick by healthiness. I'm going to stick and try to do my best to speak more centeredly. I'm going to try to be more open-minded. Concepts like that. God in me looks like what? And lastly, what form does it take on the outside? How will I speak? My actual speaking. What kind of a body posture would I have if I go back to that situation as a new person? how will it look? If things don't go well, what will I do to reestablish boundaries in the moment? Which is called creating a safe space, sacred space. The Lord watched my coming in, and now it's watched my going out. It's guiding me all the way to the practical, day-to-day talking actions as well, so that it's a complete flow, inflow, outflow. There's divine coming in, divine coming out. And I just took a challenge, turned it into a sacred space. And I will not allow the sacred space to be violated. Not for their sake or mine. It's good for us all. God only. See that? Be proud of yourself for being courageous enough to implement those boundaries and constraints, so to speak, on the ego. Be happy. Be proud of yourself. And then quietly in your own way give thanks. Set all that aside very gracefully, very casually. Center back into the room. And gradually stretch out.